Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, welcome. Today's topic is about the youth culture. And first I'd like to take this time just to greet everyone that's coming and join me in the chat. And we've got Mr. Tommy Stiggs. Thank you for coming. Brilliant, as always, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming. Miss Cranky, thank you. Thank you for coming. Hopefully you all will get involved and enjoy the show. Coltrane, my man, how are you? Good to see you. That's good. So what I'll do, I'll get into the introduction of it all. And what we'll talk, as I say, it is about the youth culture. Now, I welcome you all, and I'd like you to think about the youth culture and what that thought means to you. Now, you may be like me and think that the modern day youth culture is somewhat lost and has been caught up in the modern day, I don't know, wokeism, for another word. When youngsters used to take on a social identity and be part of a new trend and fashion, which was always anti-establishment, and the modern day tends to play into the establishment's hands. And the youth tends to be more hypnotized by iPhones, TVs, and computers. Now, when you think about it, the youth used to go out and play, go to social clubs, be part of factions, and it was somewhat their factions were mainly driven by music and fashion somewhat. And whilst there has been many youth cultures and subcultures, I will take us back through time and cover an array of cultures, and then come back to my original question. Hello there, William Brooklyn. Good to see you. So basically what I want to think, you think about is, what do you think of the youth culture today compared to back then? Has it been lost? And are we now in an era where the establishment and politics and TV has managed to strangle the much known cultures we once knew? Hello there. Hi, Mike. Okay, good man. So, well, first off, I want to try and kick off. I'm going to kick off with going through an array. As you can appreciate, there's been many cultures over the years, and I'm just going to take us through a selected few. So, just bear with me 2 seconds, and I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Right. Okay. So first off, I want to start off with the Bobby Soxers. I don't know whether there might be some in the chat. Tommy might know what I'm talking about here, because this is somewhat covered in the American culture. The Bobby Soxers were a subculture of young women in the mid to late 1940s, and their interests included popular music, in particular of that of Frank Sinatra, and they were wearing loose-fitting clothing, notably Bobby socks. Their manner of dress, which diverged sharply from earlier ideals of feminine beauty, was controversial. Shirley Temple, who was a teenager at the time, played a stereotypical Bobby Soxer in the film The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer, as you can see here on this screen. Now, the presence of Bobby Soxers signalled a shift in the American youth fashion. Businesses and corporations noticed that they were able to profit from the burgeoning consumer power of teenagers, especially among girls, and began to aim products at younger buyers, creating a new subset of American culture. Teenagers became more prominent in society as they participated in activities such as dancing and going to the movies. Music and dancing grew more popular among teenagers. In the 1940s, the most popular types of music were swing and jazz, which were favoured by the Bobby Soxers. The increased popularity of the music made it a big part of the lives of the Bobby Soxers, as they frequently discussed the favourite musicians and each other and bonded over records. Now, the origins of the phrase Bobby Soxer date back to 1943 Time article, which described the teenage girls of the time as little long-haired girls with round faces who wore Bobby socks and worshipped Frank Sinatra. And another common phrase was the Bobby Sox girls. Now, the phrase derives from the ankle socks often worn by female high school students. These socks were usually paired with loafers or saddle shoes. Now, by the end of the 40s, the Bobby Soxers were unanimously defined as either just fans of Frank Sinatra or teenage girls who were obsessed with the fads and crazes of the times. Now, the phrase Bobby Soxer was often rejected by the girls and instead promoted largely by the media. Now, the term since has been used by dictionaries to describe an adolescent girl. Okay, so the next one. Now, this one we haven't seen for a while. This one is for Don Miku. Now, this is the Bodgies and Widgies. Now, that refers to a youth subculture that existed in Australia and New Zealand in the 1950s, similar to the rocker culture in the UK or greaser culture in the United States. Most Bodgies rode motorbikes, but some had cars, many of which embellished with accessories such as mag wheels and hot dog mufflers. Males were often called Bodgies and females were the Widgies. Now, Bodgies were often depicted in Australian media as folklore louts. Now, with the Bodgies growing their hair long and getting around in satin skirts, and Wedgies cutting their hair short and wearing jeans, confusion seems to be arising about the sex of some Australian adolescents. Now, the first Bodgies were World War II. Australian seamen who were well as impersonating Americans were black marketers, and the first Bodgie gang was the Woolloomooloo Yanks, who congregated in Cathedral Street, Woolloomooloo. Now, by 1948, about 200 Bodgies were regularly frequenting King's Cross milk bars. Soon, Bodgie gangs formed out inner Sydney locations after a time, and moccasins and American drape suits, complete with peg trousers, replaced their attire with blue jeans and leather American airline jackets or zoo suits. Now, for the budgies, almost all of them were working class, emulating the high status Americans who so recently occupied Australia, as a military personnel was easier than achieving upward social mobility. The next one, the chavs. Now, chavs mainly more common in England. Now, the term chav is usually for a scally or a roadman in parts of England, and it's a British term, usually used in a derogatory way. Now, the term is used to describe an antisocial lower class youth dressed in sportswear. The use of the word has been described as a form of social racism, or chavette is related to referring to a female chav, and you got other terminology such as chavvy, chavish, and chavistic are used to describe things associated with the chavs, such as famous slang. Now, in other countries like Ireland, they use the term scanga, and in places like Canada, hoodman as well. Now, in Newfoundland, the term skeet is another similar way, and in Australia they use the word essay or ishay, should I say. Now, the term had become widely used to refer to the type of antisocial, uncultured youth portrayed as wearing excessive, flashy jewellery, white athletic shoes, baseball caps, and sham designer clothes. Similarly, the girls are portrayed as commonly wearing clothes which expose their midriffs. Besides referring to the loutish, ill-mannered behaviour, violence, and particular speech patterns, all of which are stereotyped, and the chav stereotype includes wearing branded designer sportswear, which may be accompanied by some flashy gold jewellery, otherwise termed as bling. Now, the next one I want to cover is the dark culture. Now, the dark culture, also called the dark alternative scene, is a mixture of thematical related subcultures, including the goth and dark wave subculture, the dark neoclassic dark ambient scene, parts of the post-industrial scene. Now, like I say, it's sort of related with genres including electro-industrial, EBM, agrotech, and dark electro, and parts of neo-folk and early goth metal scene. Now, dark culture's original lies in the followers of dark wave and independent music, but over the decades it has developed to a social network held together by a common concept of aesthetics, self-representation, and individualism. Now, the music preference of the dark scene are characterized by a mix of styles ranging from goth metal to industrial dance music and dark ambient to dark neoclassical and neo-medieval and dark folk music to gothic rock, dark wave, and post-punk. Now, dark culture is regarded as a community defined by common interests such as art, fashion, philosophy, and arguably most significantly, by music. Now, originate from the shared appreciation of dark wave and the independent music, the term now collectively used as dark music. Hello there, Hollywood. Thank you for coming. Dark culture emerged to represent a group of people who define themselves through internal symbols and alternate forms of media. Now, in the 21st century, the culture is appreciated as a heterogeneous collection of different subculture currents without being tied to a particular style of music, associated thinking, behaviour, or dress code. Now, despite most members sharing similar interests of such due to this emergence from the dark scene, the colour is a central part of communication within dark culture, symbolising, representing a vast spectrum of elements. This scene represents within emotion, fashion, music, and general behaviour. And among other things, it's a visual expression of feelings surrounding hopelessness, melancholia, darkness, and is forevermore significantly used to reference towards grief and death. Now, the next one cover again is the ishay. Now, this slang expression is associated with the Australian urban youth subculture that originated from Western Sydney in the late 1980s, but was brought into the mainstream since the late 2010s and the 2020. Now, the ishays or lads are often considered stereotypical, hypermasculine, and inclined to crime and violence. However, while most ishays are male, a minority of them are female. Hello there, Cheech. Thank you for coming. They may be affiliated with other local youth from a postcode, hang out in groups, use slang derived from the word pig Latin. They wear sportswear, they have mullets and engage in immature and antisocial behaviour. Common fashion items include bum bags and night shoes. Now, due to the Ishe subculture surrounding the shoe, where it has been banned from pubs and clubs, Ishes often have access to alcohol, e-cigarettes, illegal drugs, pornography, and social media. Now, the next one. I'm just going to take the time. Glam rock.
I've been driving all night, my hands wet on the wheel. There's a voice in my head that drives my heel. Then I go, get it on, get it on. Then I go, get it on.
Now, glam rock is a style of rock music and that was developed in the UK in the early 70s and was primarily defined by the flamboyant clothing, makeup and hairstyles of its musicians, particularly platform shoes and glitter. Glam artists drew on diverse sources ranging from bubblegum pop and the 1950s rock and roll, cabaret and science fiction, and complex art rock. Now, the flamboyant clothing and visual styles of performers were often camp or androgynous and have been described as playing with other gender roles. Now, glitter rock was a more extreme version of glam rock. So, a lot of the bands that we tend to associate. So, in March 1971, it was really the appearance of T-Rex frontman Mark Bolan is often cited as the beginning of the movement. Other British glam rock artists, which included the likes of David Bowie, Mott the Hoople, Sweet Slade, Mud and Roxy Music, as well as Alvin Stardust. Though not central to the genre, artists such as Elton John, Rod Stewart, Freddie Mercury also adopted glam styles. In the United States, the scene was much less prevalent, with Alice Cooper and Lou Reed the only American artists to score a hit in the UK. You got other American glam artists, which included the New York Dolls, Sparks, Suzi Quatro, Iggy Pop, and Job Roth. Glam rock declined after the mid-70s, but it influenced the other musical genres, including punk rock, glam metal, death rock, and gothic rock. The New Romantic movement, which began as an underground fashion subculture movement in the nightclubs in the 70s before becoming mainstream in the early 80s, was also inspired by the visuals of the glam rock era. Now, glam rock can be seen as fashion as well as a musical subgenre. Glam artists rejected the revolutionary rhetoric of the late 60s rock scene, instead glorifying decadence, superficiality, and the simple structures of the earlier pop music in response to these characteristics. Scholars such as I. Taylor and D. Wall characterise glam rock as offensive, commercial, and cultural emasculation. So, with our next one.
I feel like I wanna live.
The golden years. Now I'm feeling zombified. Now I'm feeling zombified.
Yes, if you haven't guessed it, that is the goth subculture. Goth is a subculture. It began in the UK in the early 80s. It was developed by fans of gothic rock, an offshoot of the post-punk music genre. Post-punk artists who anticipated the gothic rock genre and helped develop and shape subculture included Susie and the Banshees, Sisters of Mercy, and The Cure and Joy Division. Now, the goth subculture has survived much longer than others of the same era and has continued to diversify and spread throughout the world. Its imagery and culture proclivities indicate influences from the 19th century Gothic fiction and from horror films. The scene is centered on music festivals, nightclubs, and organized meetings, especially in Western Europe. The subculture has associated tastes in music, aesthetics, and fashion. Now, the music preferred by goths includes a number of styles such as goth rock, death rock, cold wave, dark wave, and ethereal wave. Now, the gothic fashion style draws influences from punk, new wave, new romantic fashion, and dressing styles of the early periods, such as the Victorian, Edwardian, and the Belle Epoque eras. The style often includes dark, usually solid black attire, dark makeup, and black hair. Now, the bands defined and embraced the gothic rock genre, including the Bahas, Adam and the Ants, The Cure, Birthday Party, Southern Death Cult, Specimen, Killing Joke, and The Damned. Now, near the peak of the first generation of the Gothic scene in 1983, the Faces' Paul Rambilli recalled several strong Gothic characteristics in the music of the Joy Division. So in 1984, the Joy Division's bassist, Peter Hook, named Playdead as one of their heirs. If you listen to a band like Playdead, who I really like, he said, Joy Division plays similar music to Playdead. Now, by the 1980s, the bands began proliferating and became increasingly popular, including the Sisters of Mercy, who we listened to there on the video, the Mission, the March Violets, XML, Deutschland, and the Membranes and Fields of the Nephilim. Now, records labels like Factory 4AD and Beggar's Banquet released much of this music in Europe, and through a vibrant import music market in the US, the subculture grew, especially in New York and Los Angeles, California, where many nightclubs featured Gothic industrial nights and bands like Black Tape and Blue Girl, Theatre of Ice and Human Drama, and The Wake became key figures of the genre to expand at a nationwide level. Yeah. Hello there, Cheech. Yeah, great bands. Here we go. I just want to take the time here just to... There you go, Cheech. Okay. So in the 1990s, saw further growth for some 1980s bands and the emerge of many new acts, as well as good new Gothic-centric US record labels such as Cleopatra Records. Among others, according to Dave Simpson, The Guardian said that the 90s goth all disappeared as dance music became the dominant youth culture, and as a result, goth movement went underground and fractured into cyber goth, shock rock, and industrial metal, gothic metal, and medieval folk metal. Marilyn Manson was seen as a goth rock shock icon, who we all knew. Hello there, Dave T. Good to see you. Good man. Now, the goth subculture in the 80s drew inspiration from a variety of sources. Some were modern or contemporary, others were centuries old or ancient. Now, Michael Bibby and Lauren Goodlad likened the subculture to a bricolage. Among the music subculture that influenced were punk, new wave, and glam, but it also drew inspiration from B movies, Gothic literature, horror films, vampire cults, and traditional mythology. Among the mythologies that proved influential in all goth works and Celtic mythology. There's also Christian mythology, Egyptian mythology, and various traditions of paganism played a role in it. So this next one, we're moving on to, is grunge, and this one really is for Asada. Shame he's not with us. And the reason why I say that is because grunge, as we know, it came out the state of Washington, Seattle. So it was an alternative rock genre and subculture which emerged during the mid-80s in the US state of Washington, particularly in Seattle and many of the nearby towns. Now, grunge fuses elements of punk rock and heavy metal. The genre featured the distorted electrical guitar used in both genres, although some bands performed with the emphasis on one or the other. Like these genres, grunge typically uses electric guitar, bass, guitar, and drums and vocals. Grunge also incorporates influences from indie rock bands such as Sonic Youth, Lyrics, and typical angst-filled and introspective, often addressing themes such as social alienation, self-doubt, abuse, neglect, betrayal, social and emotional isolation, addiction, psychological trauma, and a desire for freedom. Now, the early grunge movement, there we go. Hello there, Krumel. Good to see you. Around Seattle's independent record label, Sub Pop, and the region's underground music scene. The owners of Sub Pop marketed the style shrewdly, encouraging the media to describe it as grunge. The style became known as a hybrid of punk and metal. Now, by the early 90s, its popularity has spread, with grunge bands appearing in California, then emerging in parts of the United States and then in Australia, building strong followings and signing major record deals. Now, a lot of these, I'm going to name these bands. I know that most of my crowd should know these, now, that are strongly associated with grunge, and that is Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Stone Temple Pilots, just to name a few. Now, the word grunge is an American slang for something or something that is repugnant, and also for dirt. Now, the word was first recorded as being applied to Seattle musicians in 1987, when Bruce Pavitt described the Green Rivers Dry as a bone EP in a Sub Pop record company catalogue as gritty vocals, roaring Marshall amps, ultra loose grunge, and that destroyed the moral of a generation. Now, although the word grunge has been used to describe bands since the 60s, this was the first association of grunge with the grinding and sludgy sound of Seattle. It is expensive time consuming to get recording to sound clean. So for the Northwestern bands just starting out, it was cheaper for them to leave the sound dirty and just turned up their volume. This dirty sound, due to low budgets, familiarity with recording, and lack of professionalism, may be the original term grunge. Okay, so the next one. We all know this. Heavy metal. Okay. Now, the fans of heavy metal music, commonly referred to as metalheads, have created their own subculture. That encompasses more than just the appreciation of the style of music. Fans affirm their membership in a subcultural scene by attending metal concerts. That's right, Cranky. Now, buying albums, growing their hair long, although some metalheads do wear their hair short. One very famous example was in the late 70s, early 80s of Robert Halford. Now, wearing jackets or vests often made of leather, denim or leather, adorned with brand patches and often studs, and by contributing to metal publications since the early 80s. Now, the metal scene, like the rock scene in general, is associated with alcohol, tobacco, and drug use, as well as riding motorcycles and having many tattoos. Now, while there are songs that celebrate drinking, smoking, drug abuse, and gambling, and having tattoos and partying, I mean, who would? There are also many songs that warn about dangers of those activities. Now, the metal fan base was traditionally working class, white and male in the 1970s, and since the 80s, more female fans have developed an interest in their style. Now, heavy metal fans have created a subculture of alienation with its own standards of achieving authenticity within the group. Another aspect of metal culture in its fashion, typically the heavy metal fashion of the late 70s and the 80s, comprised of tight blue jeans or drill pants, motorcycle boots or high-top sneakers and black t-shirts, or with sleeveless coat or denim or leather emblazoned with woven patches and button pins from heavy metal bands. Sometimes a denim vest emblazoned with album art knits was also worn over a long sleeve leather jacket. As with other music subcultures of that era, such as punks, the jackets and its emblems and logos help the wearer to announce their interest, and metal fans often wore a t-shirt of emblem of bands. Hello there, Suzanne. Good to see you. Sort of take a little time just to engage with the chat. That's good. Yeah, good stuff, Cranky. Now, gestures and movements. I'll leave that one there. Now, asphyxiate headbanging during a performance. At concerts in place of typical dancing, metal fans are more than likely to mosh and headbang, which is a movement which the head is shaken up and down in time with the music. Now, fans in heavy metal subculture often make the corner hand gesture formed by a fist with the index and little fingers extended, which we have there. Okay. Now, also, this also known as devil horns or metal fist and other similar descriptors. So the next one, hip hop. Now, hip hop is a culture and art movement that was created by African Americans starting in the Bronx in New York City. Now, pioneered from Black American culture that has been around for years prior to its more mainstream discovery. Hello there, Sweet Tea. Thank you for coming. Now, it later reached other groups such as Latino Americans and Caribbean Americans. Hip hop culture has historically been shaped and dominated by African American men, though female hip hop artists have contributed to the art and the culture as well. As hip hop culture is characterized by the key elements of rapping, DJing, and turntablism and breakdancing, and other elements include graffiti, beatboxing, street entrepreneurship, hip hop language, and hip hop fashion. Now, from hip hop culture emerged a new genre of popular music, hip hop music. Now, hip hop is a culture that, as I say, originates from the South Bronx. It includes the beatboxing, breakdancing, locking, floor work, and top rock. That's the music. And then the dance is breaking is a dance style that combines of quick footwork with twists and acrobatic leg flares. They use twin turntables to switch between songs, create effects, and manipulate records. And then there's graffiti writing is an improvisation style that's influenced by the desire to create something new. And then there's the rapping, also known as MCing or rhyming. Rapping is a vocal expression that uses rhythmic and rhyming speech to tell stories and relay messages. Now, fashion. The hip-hop fashion is a unique aspect of hip-hop culture. Sneakers, jewelry, bling are often used to sometimes symbolize status and identity. The hip-hop language is a unique aspect of the hip-hop culture, and a key element of the hip-hop culture is street entrepreneurship. Now, it has become a global phenomenon that this has shaped music styles, fashion, technology, art, entertainment, language, dance, education, politics, and media. Now, for my next topic, the hippie culture. Now, this is somewhat associated with the counterculture of the 1960s, originally a youth movement that began in the United States around in 1964 and spread to different countries around the world. The word hippie came from hipster, which was used to describe beatniks who moved into New York City's Greenwich Village, San Francisco's High-Ashbury district, and Chicago's Old Town community. No worries, Paulie. Better late than never. Great to see you, as always. Now, the term hippie was used from the print by San Francisco writer Michael Fallon, helping popularize the use of the term in the media, although the tag was seen elsewhere earlier. Good man. 1960s counterculture was a broad-ranging social movement in the US, Canada, and Europe that rejected conventional mores and traditional authorities, whose members variously advocate peace, love, social justice, and revolution. The 60s counterculture movement, which generally extended into the early 70s, was an alternative approach to life that manifests itself in a variety of activities, lifestyles, artistic expression, including recreational drugs use, communal living, political protests, casual sex, and folk and rock music. Now, the movement was perhaps best encapsulated by the phrase turn on, tune in, drop out, coined by the American psychologist Timothy Leary, who demonstrated contempt for authority and championed the use of LSD and psychoactive drugs. Now, Richard Nixon, Tommy's favourite, famously called Leary the most dangerous man in America. The countercultural movement featured artists such as Andy Warhol, who was famous for his pop artworks, adherence and advocated freedom of expression and a distrust to those in power. Now, the movement ranged from non-violent peaceniks to revolutionary who engaged with armed resistance. A lot of it was fueled by college students and included protests of the Vietnam War and racial injustice and struggles for women's rights, gay rights, and sexual freedom. It led to mass demonstrations such as the 1969 anti-war protest in Washington, D.C., that drew as many as 500,000 people, the nation teaching on the environment. In 1970, it was called Earth Day, which is still commemorated annually. Now, one enduring image of counterculture movement is that of the hippies, who are mostly white middle-class young Americans. Many felt alienated from their parents' lifestyles, which they viewed as to focus on material goods and consumerism. That tension drove a generational gap that became a hallmark of the 1960s. Hippies often grew their hair long, and many men had facial hair. The title track of their musical hair, first performed in the 1967, captures this style with the lyrics. Now, I'm not going to say that because we know that song. I'll let you sing it and hum it in your head. Hippies wore colourful clothes and typically donned sandals. They eschewed regular jobs. Many had vegetarian diets and some engaged in free love. Hippies often travelled the country, sometimes in Volkswagen microbuses, hippie buses, adorned with peace signs. One of their most famous slogans was "Make love, not war." Now, as we know, a big part of that counterculture was the Beatles. Now, the Beatles, as you know, Lennon, McCartney, Ringo Starr and Harrison. Now, their rock music was more important part of the counterculture movement. Bands like the Grateful Dead, who fans know are known as the Deadheads, had a strong influence in the 60s. The Beatles, the most influential band of the era, helped make rock music a battering ram for youth culture's assault on the mainstream. Now, according to an article in the New York Times in 1975, the folk music icon Bob Dylan spoke for many alienated youth when in 1965 he sang, "I ain't gonna work on Maggie's farm no more." Now, other bands associated with the counterculture movement included Joan Baez, Jefferson Airplane, the Velvet Underground, and the Rolling Stones. Now, a powerful counterculture song was "Almost Cut My Hair," and that was by the Crosby Stills. So, while I'm touching this, I just want to show you a video now of Liverpool and when the Beatles the Beatle frenzy first took hold of the city of Liverpool. Okay.
Liverpool, the Mersey sound. A sound that means something different from what it did when Liverpool was just an important port. Because now, much to its surprise, the great northern city has got a new industry, as incongruous as the soot on its classical buildings. Liverpool's cathedral, built painfully slowly through the years, as what? As a mecca for this new generation of long-haired inhabitants, not unconnected with its latest product? Not really. You'll find more of them gathered together in a gramophone record shop. The Mersey sound. Yes, Liverpool selling pop music. Liverpool setting the fashion in Beatle hairdos that baffle you as to a person's gender. Liverpool kids are proud of the fact that their city is providing the world with beat music and an offbeat cult of fashion that has knocked their great docks as a municipal money spinner well into second place. Tune in for a bit. Mersey sound which has made itself heard, and to go with it, just consider that Mersey hairdo, at present blinkering the teenage world. This too is a Liverpool creation. So watch the top Lime Street expert go to town. The scissors are a mere reminder of the barber's misspent past. In Liverpool, this long, lank hairstyle is a must, compulsory, unless you've got the corkscrew sort of hair that can't be coaxed. And this is something rich that the city fathers, in all their wisdom and foresight, never foresaw. It might be Rome, this city centre, and certainly these young people, if they had togas, could pass as citizens of the period of Rome's decline. Study these senators. But to see Liverpool, you must see the Mersey Tunnel. They're even more proud of it than they are of their cathedral. Because anyway, the Liverpool kids have another cathedral, a cellar called the Cavern, where their new £1 million-a-year music started up. Be still, those of you who are middle-aged. Be silent, ye young addicts to the Mersey sound. This is the holy of holies of the age of beat. These are the Mersey Sound pilgrims. Like it or not, this is the rich new market for music, if that's what you call it, and a whole new range of consumer goods that never could be sold before. And tonight, they're going to elect the new top guitar group that can make the music they appreciate. 1,000 groups all through the country competed for this honor. And the start is quiet enough in all conscience. Session at the Cavern is underway.
Okay. Hope you enjoyed that little video there. So just finishing up now, obviously on the counterculture movement. Music festivals, they help fuel the counterculture movement, most famously Woodstock and the 3-day 1969 extravaganza in upstate New York that featured bands and artists such as the Grateful Dead, Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane and Santana. Hello there, Janie. Good to see you. Now, an estimated 400,000 people attended the event in December 1969. The Altamont Festival in Livermore, California, resulted in tragedy. Organisers made the fateful decision to hire the Hells Angels, a motorcycle gang, to provide security, and one of its members fatally stabbed a black teenager who had drawn a gun as the Rolling Stones were performing. The Associated Press reflected 2 decades later at this moment, and it shattered the dream of the utopian counterculture for the 1960s generation. So now, the modern day hipsters. Now, the 21st century hipster is sometimes called hipsterism. Now, fashion is a major marker in this hipster identity. Now, members of the subculture typically do not self-identify as hipsters, and the word hipster is often used as for someone who is pretentious or overly concerned with appearing trendy. Now, the subculture is often associated with indie and alternative music. Now, in the US and Canada, it's mostly associated and perceived with upper middle class white young adults who gentrify urban areas. The subculture has been critiqued as lacking authenticity, promoting conformity, and embodying a particular ethic of consumption that seeks to commodify the idea of rebellion or counterculture. Now, the term hipster, in its present usage, first appeared in the 90s and became widely used in the late 2000s. Being derived from the early hipster movements of the 40s, hipster culture had become a global phenomenon during the early mid-2010s before declining from the mainstream. Now, things I associate with modern day hipsters, it would be things like microbreweries, thrift stores, vegan restaurants, and tattoo parlours. So I'm just going to take a little break there. James, I know a few Blue Angels, the UK bikers, mainly based in London and Glasgow. Yeah, I'm not too familiar on the biker gangs around here, Paul. Okay. Hello there. Is everyone all right in the chat? Still with me? Good. Now, this is the next one. I won't go in too deep because I've already covered it in an earlier video, as you know, and that's the mod. Quick from the word modernist, subculture that began in the 50s, London, and spread throughout Britain and eventually influencing fashions and trends in other countries. And as I say, it continues today on a smaller scale, focused on music and fashion. The subculture has its roots in a small group of stylish London-based young men and women, and in the late 50s were termed modernists because they listened to modern jazz. Elements of the mob subculture included soft, often tailor-made suits, music, soul, rhythm and blues, ska and mainly jazz, and motor scooters, Lamborghini and Vespa. And in the mid-60s, they started to fade out, and the subculture listened to rock groups with jazz and blues influences as those of The Who and the Small Faces. Now, as mod became more cosmopolitan during the swinging London period, some working class street mods splintered off, forming other groups such as the Skinheads. And in the late 70s, there was a mod revival in Britain which attempted to replicate the scooter period look and styles early to mid 1960s. Now, it's followed by similar mod revival in North America in the early 80s, particularly in Southern California. Now, the New Romantic. This culture, right. New Romantic was an underground subculture movement that originated in the United Kingdom in the late 70s. The movement was emerged from the nightclub scene in London and Birmingham at venues such as Billy's and the Blitz. Now, the New Romantic movement was characterised by flamboyant, eccentric fashion inspired by fashion boutiques such as Kahn and Bell in Birmingham and PX in London. Early adherents of the movement were often referred to by the press with such names as the Blitz Kids, New Dandies, and Romantic Rebels. Now, influenced by David Bowie and Mark Bolan and Roxy music, the New Romantics developed fashions inspired by glam rock era, coupled with the early Romantic period in the late 18th and early 19th century. The term New Romantic is known to have been coined by musician, producer, manager, innovator Richard James Burgess. Though it was a fashion movement, several British music acts in the 70s and 80s adopted the style, became more epitomised it with the press, including the likes of Visage, Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, A Flock of Seagulls, and the Boy George and the Culture Club. Now, aspiring bands of the era, including ABC, Depeche Mode, The Human League, Soft Cell and Simple Minds, as well as OMD and Talk Talk, all have some point been described as being part of the New Romantic movement or as being influenced by it, while others would consider them distinct from it. Now, a number of these bands adopted synthesizers and helped to develop synth pop in the early 80s, which combined with the distinctive New Romantic visuals and helped them first to national success in the UK, and then via MTV play a major part in the second British invasion. Here we go. My aunt and uncle still dressed like my mum's brother and sister. My uncle liked bell bottoms and boots. It was embarrassing. That's why I don't go anywhere with them. Well, do you know what, Suzanne? At least they were identified with a subculture, because when I go back to the end of this, what culture is around today? Now, by the beginning of 1982, the original movement had largely disappeared, really. And although many of the artists associated with the scene continued their careers, some to enormous commercial success in the next few years, they had largely abandoned the aesthetics of the movement, and there were attempts to revive the movement from the 1990s. Okay, so I'm going to...
We slip and slide as we fall in love, and I just
welcome back. Now, the next one, the punk culture. Now, this includes a diverse, widely known of array music, ideologies, fashion, and other forms of expression, visual art, dance, literature, and film, largely characterized by anti-establishment views, the promotion of individual freedom and DIY ethics. The culture originated from punk rock. Now, the punk ethos is primarily made up of beliefs such as nonconformity, anti-authoritarianism, anti-corporatism, to do it yourself ethic, anti-consumerist, anti-corporate greed, direct action, and not selling out. Now, there is a wide range of punk fashion, including t-shirts, leather jackets, Doc Martin boots, hairstyles such as brightly coloured hair, as seen there, and spiked mohawks, cosmetic tattoos, jewellery, and body modification. Women in the hardcore scene typically wore clothing categorised as masculine. Now, punk aesthetics determine the type of art punks enjoy, which typically has underground minimalist, iconoclast, and satiricalist sensibilities. Punk has generated a considerable amount of poetry and prose and has its own underground press in formal designs. Now, many punk theme films have been made. Now, early punk had an abundance of sort of antecedents and influences, and John Savage described the subculture as bricolage, and almost every previous youth culture in the Western world since World War II stuck together with safety pins. Now, in the late 70s, the subculture began to diversify, which led to the proliferation of factions such as new wave, post-punk, two-tone, hardcore punk, no wave, street punk, hardcore punk, and sought to do away with the frivolities introduced in the later years with the original punk movement. Now, the music is centered around sort of loud, aggressive genre of rock music called punk rock, usually played by bands consisting of vocalists, one or two electric guitarists, electric bassists, and a drummer. And in some bands, the musicians contributed backup vocals, which typically consist of shouted slogans, choruses, or football-style chants. Whoa. Now, while most punk rock uses distorted guitars and noisy drumming sounds derived from the 60s, garage rock, and then you had the 70s pub rock. Now, some punk bands incorporate elements of other subgenres such as surf rock, rockabilly, or reggae. Now, most punk rock songs are short and have simply somewhat basic arrangements using relatively few chords and typically have lyrics that express punk ideology and values. Although some punk lyrics are about lighter topics such as partying or a romantic relationship. Right, the next one. The rave culture. Now, is a dance party at a warehouse, club, or other private or public venue, typically featuring performing DJs playing electronic dance music. This style most associated with the early 1990s dance music scene, when DJs played at illegal raves in musical styles and dominated by electronic dance music from a wide range of subgenres, including drum and bass, dubstep, tap, break, happy hardcore, trance, techno, house, and alternative dance. Occasionally, live musicians have been known to perform at raves in addition to the other types of performing artists such as go-go dancers and fire dancers. Now, the music is amplified with a large, powerful sound reinforcement system, typically the large subwoofers to produce a deep bass sound. The music is often accompanied by a laser light show, projected colour images, visual effects, and fog machines. Now, with some raves, maybe small parties and nightclubs or private homes, but some raves they grew to immense sizes, such as large festivals and events featuring multiple DJs dance areas. I'll give you an example in Castle Morton in 1992. So some electronic dance music festivals have features of raves, but on a larger, often commercial scale, raves may last for a long time, with some events continuing for 24 hours and lasting throughout the night. While law enforcement raids and anti-rave laws have presented a challenge for the rave scene in many countries, notably the Criminal Justice Bill Act that was brought in the UK. Now, this is due to association of rave culture with illegal drugs such as MDMA, LSD, amphetamine, cocaine, methamphetamine, and cannabis. Now, while they'll say that, the reality is that they brought in the Criminal Justice Bill Act because they weren't making any money off the raves. That's what really happened. Okay, next one. Rocker. Okay, as we know, the Leather Boys, Tone Up Boys, members of followers of a biker subculture that originated in the United Kingdom during the 50s and was popular in the 60s. The term greaser and rocker have become synonymous with the British Isles, although those used differently in North America and elsewhere. Rockers were also derived, known as coffee bar cowboys. Now, the rocker subculture came about due to factors such as the end of post-war rationing in the UK, general rise in prosperity for working class youths, and the recent availability of credit and financing for young people. The influence of American popular music and films, the construction of racetrack-like arterial roads around British cities. Now, the development of transport casts and a peak in the British motorcycle industry. The name rocker came from the not from the music, but from the rockers found in the four-stroke engines. So the next one, yes, this is the Rude Boys. Now, the Rude Boys are subculture that originated in 1960s Jamaican street culture. And in the late 1970s, there was a revival in England of the term rude boy and rude girl. Now, being used to describe fans of two-tone and ska, the revival of the subculture and term was partially the result of Jamaican immigration to the UK and the so-called Windrush generation. The use of the term moved into a contemporary ska punk movement, as well as UK and especially Jamaica. The terms rude boy and rude girl are used in a way similar to gangster, yardie, or bad man. Now, the term rude boy and the rude boy culture arose in the poorer sections of Kingston, Jamaica, and was associated with violent, discontented youths. Along with ska and rock steady music, many rude boys favoured sharp suits, thin ties, and pork pie or trilby hats, showing an influence of the fashion of the US jazz musicians and soul artists. Now, starting in the 70s, Jamaican reggae music replaced the ska and rocksteady music associated with the Rude Boys. And in the 80s, the dancehall became the main Jamaica popular music genre. Now, in the 60s, the Jamaican diaspora introduced the Rude Boy music and fashion to the United Kingdom, which influenced the mod and skinhead subcultures. And in the late 70s, the term Rude Boy and Rude Boy fashion came back into the use after the two-tone band, more notably the Specials. Right, now the next one, the skinhead. We're getting there, guys. We're getting there. I'm glad you're still there with me. Right. A skinhead or skin is a member of a subculture that originated among the working class youth in London, England in the 60s. It soon spread to other parts of the UK, with a second working class skinhead movement emerging worldwide in the late 1970s. Motivated by social alienation and working class solidarity, skinheads are defined by their close-cropped or shaven heads and working class clothes such as Doc Martens and steel toe cap work boots, braces, high-rise and varying length straight-length jeans and button-down collar shirts, usually slim-fitting in check or plain. Now, the movement reached a peak at the end of the 60s, experienced a revival in the 80s and since then has endured multiple contexts worldwide. The rise to the prominent skinheads came in two waves, with the first wave taking place in the 60s. The first skinheads were working class youths motivated by an expression of alternative values and working class pride, rejecting both the austerity and conservatism of the 50s and the 60s and the more middle class of the bourgeois hippie movement and the peace and love ethos of the mid to late 60s. Skinheads were instead drawn towards more working class outer subcultures, incorporating elements of working class mod fashion and Jamaican music and fashion, especially from the Jamaican Rude Boys. Now, the next one. Yeah, the Teddy Boys. Right. The Teddy Boys of the Teds were mainly a British youth subculture in the early 50s and 60s who were interested in rock and roll and R&B music, wearing clothes partly inspired by the styles worn by dandies in the Edwardian period, which Savile Row tailors had attempted to reintroduce in Britain after the Second World War. Now, they typically wear black suede creepers, fashionable during the 50s, bolo tie, featuring like a Native American design. A mainly British phenomenon, the Teddy Boy subculture started among teenagers in London in the early 50s and rapidly spread across the UK, becoming strongly associated with the American rock and roll music. Now, after World War II, male youths in delinquent gangs who adopted the Edwardian era fashion were sometimes known as Kosh Boys. Now, the name Teddy Boy was coined when in an article came out in the Daily Express in 1953 and reported the headline shortened Edwardian to Teddy. Nevertheless, the term had previously been used in Edwardian England to refer to members of the Territorial Army. Now, the next one. We're nearly there. That's right, the yuppie. Now, yuppie, short for young urban professional or young upwardly mobile professional, was a term coined in the early 1980s for a young professional working in the city. Now, it was first attested in 1980 when it was used as a fairly neutral demographic label. But by the mid to late 1980s, when a yuppie backlash developed due to a concern over issues as gentrification, the first printed appearance of the word was in May 1980 in a Chicago magazine article. Now, it was reported in 2015 that we heard the term of people using the word yuppie again. And at the time, it was understood. How are you doing, Richie? You all right? People, say, understood it was rather a neutral demographic term. Nonetheless, the term gained the currency in the United States in 1983. Okay. So the proliferation of the word was affected by the publication of the Yuppie Handbook. Now, in January 1983, followed by Senator Gary Hart's 1984 candidacy as a Yuppie candidate for the President of the United States, the term was then used to describe a political demographic group of socially liberal but fiscally conservative voters favouring his candidacy. There was an article in the Newsweek magazine in '84, year of the yuppie, characterising salary range, occupation, and politics of yuppies as demographically hazy, and the alternative acronym, which is YUMPY, for young upwardly mobile professionals, was also current in the 1980s but failed to catch on. Right. So what I'm going to, going back to what I originally said. So we're pretty much coming to the end of it. And I want to just maybe reach out to the chat. So what I said was, what do we think? I've gone through a number there of cultures. As I say, most of them, not all of them, were influenced by music. How do them cultures of that era, I've covered pretty much from the 50s all the way up, compare to the culture now? Now, while elements of them are still around, do you think now, when you look at it, that actually, like the culture, the youth culture, in your opinion, was it better then than it is today? Is there really a youth culture of today? That's the question for my chat. So, and our Rude Boy's song was about a real thing. It was indeed. So, is there anyone in the chat that would like to voice their opinion on what they agree about the youth culture today compared to the youth culture of yesterday? Good to see you, Richie. Paulie, I know you're usually there. You'll have something to chip in on this. Mr. Edwin Jimenez, blessings to you, sir. Thank you for turning up. So, in my opinion, I don't think that the culture of today, the youth culture, has anything on those cultures of yesterday. And I think that a lot of it has been due to political influence. That's my opinion, of course. I just don't. I think that the youth of yesterday were. Well, they certainly weren't as mollycoddled. They had it all a lot harder, and they kind of went away and they formed these identities. I mean, what do you think? What do you think, viewers out there that are watching? How does the youth culture compare? Well, I've given you my 2 pence worth. I'll leave you to think about that, because from my standpoint, exactly. Thank you, Suzanne. No, I don't. Think about all those ones that I've touched upon. And you can identify from when you were growing up. What is there today? Exactly, Tommy. They're more normal. Yes, maybe, but is that because they've been, I don't know, shaped? They've been shaped by the environment around them, like the media. You know, they're kind of like, are they more brainwashed? It's an open for debate. 100%. No one cares that they're just exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is that there's not as much free thinking. Free thinking is not there anymore. That's just my opinion, and that kind of suits, as I say, the establishment, if you want to call it for that word. You know, when I was younger, look, don't get me wrong, it had its problems, but the culture of Britain, we kind of went out. We went out to parties. We went out raving. See a culture as you've shown for today? No, there isn't. I know. I'm not saying that what we did was right. 100% Cheech. You know, we did things that we shouldn't have been doing. Well, this is it, Tommy. They tried to brainwash my kids at universities. Well, that's a good thing why Trump is trying to get rid of that education department, because that's what was happening, is that they're basically, the universities are creating these little Marxists, these little Antifa warriors, and it's causing problems. Exactly. We did things, and sometimes they weren't always the right things, but we learned. It made us who we are today. Now, the difference is that the past, you had to go to places to meet these groups. Exactly. You had to actually have proper social interaction. I know it's quite ironic, but that I'm here and I'm talking to you through technology. I wouldn't be able to do that without the technology. But even still, you know, I'm nearly 45 years of age. You wouldn't want me doing, I wouldn't want to be doing this at 18 years of age. Exactly. We're out and about. Okay, well, no, I'm sorry. you were obviously doing that. Okay. Okay. I don't want to comment on that because I can't tell whether you're, Suzanne, whether you're saying that was something you regretted or you're just stating a fact there. I don't know. If you wanted to elaborate on that, I can, if you wanted to, of course. It's very hard to gauge the emotion. It was the great art and music that shaped these cultures, correct? Yeah. Everything is commercial now, not much of an underground scene, 100%. That was one of the great things, like when I mentioned there about the raves. It was all underground. They were all illegally organised, and they all did them like on farms or in warehouses, and then people get the word around, and then they'll be raving all night, and then as soon as it got bigger and bigger and bigger, that the government said they wanted to get on top of the drugs, but the reality of it is they wanted to get their end out of it. They did not succeed at it, as my kids, as well as my friends' kids, learn from us naturally. 100%, Tommy. As I say, I've seen what you've been doing and coaching with your children and with your boy at wrestling and that. So you're on top of that, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing because, like I say, you want to keep them from all the way to the bad teachings at these colleges and universities. Looking back, I regret because I feel different from. No, but at the same time, I understand why I was being protected. No, 100%. They were protecting you. No, I can understand that. And probably, you're probably sometimes sitting, what if I did have that opportunity or had that chance? But it is what it is. But at least we can sort of all, I hope, from this live, sort of get to grips and feel. And when I was going through those that you've identified, I would imagine that most of you know what all of those cultures were, and hopefully what the message that I was trying to put through on this live, just to try and highlight how what we had, all the different types of cultures then and what we have today. And really, they talk about how good things are now, but people lived back then and they learned. So do you know what I'm gonna do? I know I've been on just slightly over an hour, but I'm gonna invite. Thank you, Tommy. I've dropped the link in the chat. If anyone wants to come up and have a little chat about what I've just gone over, if you want, you can join me up on the panel. Thank you, Tommy. I really appreciate that. Okay. We'll have a quick chat about the live, and then I'll let everyone go, and we want to go off and watch the Jake Paul fight. Mike Tyson. Want to see Mike Tyson smash him. In the 70s and 80s, we saw the birth of hip hop, and punk. And I'll tell you another thing that I didn't I touched on the rave scene, but the birth of house music. Frankie Knuckles, Chicago. That was a lot of these, even though Britain's had its own, a lot of these sort of movements came out of the United States. So it was really good. Hello there.
Wow,
Tommy,
great.
thank you.
This was amazing, James. Really good presentation. I never knew. I mean, I guess I knew it, but I never really never paid attention to all these cultures that you showed. And I guess I saw most of them. I guess Bobby Sox I missed. What was the next decade that you went over, the second one? Which one was the 70s ish, 80s?
So 70s and 80s, I covered the glam rock.
Yes.
You got the 60s was the hippies.
Yep.
So I covered hip hop,
Yes.
um, covered a
Wow.
lot like punk, goth, metal, heavy
Now,
metal,
yeah. So
Teddy
there's so many
Bears.
different ones, but I'm gonna think that we obviously as a population we did have some positive outcomes from these cultures and these individuals. Some might say,
Yeah,
look at them and say, well, that is weird, but that's just, it's just part of growing up, I guess. I guess. I don't know how to look at it because obviously we did have some professionals come out of those generations. So it's very interesting.
yeah. It's just things tend to don't be that sort of eccentric or that wild anymore. I know that
Yeah,
you obviously use the term like normal, and I think
I
it's,
know.
as I say,
It's a
a
tough
lot
word.
of it is the technology and also the bad practices as well from the universities, as you mentioned, that are kind of sort of shaping the kids, and they don't really have to kind of go out and find themselves, you know?
You're right. I don't think I think the majority today, which is a little shocking to me, is following some conservative traditional standards and the way they dress, the way they act, the way they talk. I think it's been a turnaround for the most part. Not all. You're going to have a whole mix of people, but now maybe it's just me what I see with the people I'm surrounded by. But I don't know. I watched my kids go through two different universities, and overall, the kids seem to be focused. And I don't know that I don't think we have any of those cultures right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of inclined to agree. That's why I picked up this subject because I noticed the difference and I noticed sort of how it's changed. You know that, and it's not really there now. I don't want to be sitting here on a pedestal when I'm saying technology's killed it. Kids are on their phones all the time when I'm talking through YouTube on a computer. But
Mhm.
at the same time, you know, are the kids getting out and about and going to groups, going to meetings, going to maybe sporting events? Are they going for out for a few beers with their mates? Obviously, when they're a bit older and they're old enough, are they still doing that as much? You know, and
Well,
that's what.
they
God,
actually are. I'm seeing it all right now in front of my own eyes. My kids,
yeah,
my friends' kids, they go for a beer, they watch the game. They're going to watch the Tyson fight tonight with a couple of friends. Another one's going to a high school football game. So yeah, quite honestly, I think a lot of them are going
excellent.
out. Yeah,
Is that
a lot of them are going
is that
out.
is
But
naturally you're going to see it from your own from what your children are doing now that perspective, but is that quite a big wide thing, or is it just something that you're seeing from what your children are doing?
let's just say I visit around. I'm big into the wrestling. Let's say I go to 10 different local high schools and I watch the wrestling, and then I go to
Yeah,
like Rutgers University, Princeton University, and I will watch, and I will absolutely see none of what we just showed, none of what was presented on here. I'm seeing kids that are getting educated.
yeah,
The social skills are pretty good. We say they're tied to these phones. That is true. But a lot of
yeah,
them, and I was surprised myself to see it, James, they do have some good social skills. They're going to gym, they go back into gyms, they're playing football, they're doing this. So I think a big turnaround has happened. I really do. Or
good.
happening. It's good to see
Hope
it. It's
so,
great to
and that,
see.
and that's what probably that's what we're hoping, and one of the things that Trump will change. He'll stop this nonsense, and hopefully it will trickle down from the top, and everything will get back to what we used to know it to be,
Yeah.
from a whole social perspective, and this sort of nonsense and this, all that's been going on in the media, and
Yeah. It still comes from within. It still comes from within. So if they have a strong structure or some good guidance, no
yeah,
matter who's in the office and this and that, I think it will work because obviously my kids were, and a lot of the kids that I know were teenage years through Biden.
Yeah,
because they're in their 20s now, so they get their, they graduated in the Biden years. So, but
that's good.
still, we're able to. I think overall, we are a new culture, and I think overall, if you did a show like this 20 years from now and added this right now, I
Yeah.
think obviously you're gonna present if you did this in 20 years, you're definitely going to present it with the iPhones and all that other stuff, the Xbox and all of that. But I think if you look and you get snapshots and videos of kids hanging out, kids at the mall, you're going to see they're all dressed pretty good, clean cut. Yeah, yeah. We're not seeing any. There's no extreme right now. Actually, is what I'm trying to say. There's no extreme as far as style and rebellion. I don't think there is much of that right now. You'll have some, but
Okay.
overall, I think you got a good, I think you got a decent group coming out right now. Overall,
Yeah, because I always used to associate certainly things like the Gothic culture and a lot of that. That
yep,
that, that was quite big in the US. Heavy metal,
yeah.
all
The
those types
Gothic
of.
was, oh sure, I remember it all. The Gothic was all the mosh pit, all those dance, those rough dancing and all that stuff. So yeah, the Gothic, yes, yeah, you're right.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Well, Joe, what? It's been a pleasure.
yeah, you touched on
I'm,
some
I'm
great
gonna.
topics, James. I'm gonna get off. You did some great topics. You really touched on some good stuff. I mean, you probably spanned about ooh, 60 years, six,
Yeah,
six, 60 years maybe you did there. Is that about right?
yeah. I was just. Yeah, but I'd say so. I tried to get in all the major ones because obviously there's tons of these cultures out there. But I just wanted to hit the ones that would be more commonly known. So certainly to everyone in the chat and those people out there watching. And it's been
Uh,
no, it's been really good. And I'm glad you come up and thank you. And as I say, thank you to everybody in the chat. I love being a part of this community.
before I get off,
I, yeah.
James, I want to ask you, what do you see there? Uh, any of what I'm saying, or you're seeing a difference or a change, or same old, same old?
I,
What are you seeing there? Because that's interesting
I,
too. We don't get to see what you got going
we
on.
were kind of as a nation, we were kind of like big going out. We like to go out
Uh-huh.
to the pub a lot of raves and a lot of dance venues and things like that.
Uh,
A lot of pubs have been closing left, right, and centre. Um,
oh,
so I've noticed that because obviously, if people aren't using them, they're not making any money, so they've got to go. And
right,
so,
right.
somewhat of where we might have been a nation of big drinkers, we don't tend to be as much like that anymore. So that culture's kind of died from the. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but what I'm saying is, if something goes, then something has to replace it. And I don't. I'm only seeing it from my standpoint. I've got to remember, I'm not a young man anymore. I'm in my mid. I'm in my mid 40s, so maybe I'm seeing it all wrong. But
Right.
I
I know.
I'm just sort of
Uh,
measuring it from that standpoint. But maybe kids are a little bit more health focused now these days. But Britain is America's always had more. That's why I've always been envious of America because you
no,
guys always seem to get the best of everything and the first of everything. So,
interesting. Uh-huh.
but
Interesting.
yeah,
What about night? One more thing. What about nightlife over there? Have you seen it change? Like after
it's,
COVID and all of this stuff, did you see a
yeah,
change in
COVID,
nightlife over there?
yeah, COVID
You
killed a
did.
lot of the nightlife. There
Yes, I heard
you
too.
used to go into nightclubs and they'll be open to the early hours of the morning. Now a lot of these sort of music events they don't really happen until the summer, and they start at like 10 o'clock, like midday, and then they'll wrap up at like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Them sort of
Same here.
venues used to you go out, you go to one thing during the day, and then you go to the night one, which will continue on through to the morning. So that sort of thing's changed as well.
Same here. It's all gone. I have friends that are in the discotheque business.
Yeah,
They own them, and I have friends that are still bouncers at the doors and stuff like that. 10:30, 11 o'clock, it's over. Lights out. It's done. Whereas we used to go till 3 in the morning. So yes, you're
yeah,
right. So that's a worldwide thing, maybe. It's interesting because the same is happening right here. 11 o'clock, it's over. People are done with the bars and the pubs.
No, exactly. I mean, Cheech has made a fair point, and I can somewhat sort of agree with him because he said that he wouldn't want to grow up as a kid in this generation. And I think Cheech is that probably more on the point that it's just more technology based, and kids aren't free. They're not free thinkers, and they're not going out and finding themselves and learning the world that way as we used to.
Right. All right, James. I'm glad you had me on, and this was an excellent show. Really, I enjoyed it. Very, very well done. Very well done, James.
Excellent. Thank you, Tommy. Right, everyone, remember, I don't know what time. I think is it in half hour? ALV Ghost Stories.
Yeah.
Right, everyone. So please get yourselves over there in half an hour.
Okay, James. Thanks for having me up. Great show. I'll see you in all the chats.
Brilliant. Thank you. Cheers, Tommy.
Right,
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.